When I walked into the hospital, everything was silent. And walking into the waiting room, I had patients that were staring at the TV. I had employees that were out staring at the TV, and reading that room and just knowing what they needed from me was someone who was calm without all of us knowing what was happening. And that's a really dramatic example, but it was very much of that prayerful, meditative moment in the car walking in. And I think that power that day, I'm really proud of how, and I was pretty young in my career at that point in time, really proud of how that day went.
How do you think that's going to play out, especially considering the amount of money that a lot of these industries have at play? Like, do you think we'll be able to, in the next few decades, move toward a place where we're a lot better at preventing these diseases early on?
If you're looking at exercise as a medicine, I think we can get a shift in brain thought to be, rather than I'm going to take a pill because I have high blood pressure, it's the what do you need to do to physically change to see if you can. And there are people who have to take high blood pressure medicine, but is there habits you can change it by way of moving your body or eating that can help on that? And I think that more than anything will help be healthier at age. When my dad was ill, I had made that before he passed away. I had said to my aunt, like, I think my dad's just afraid to die. And she goes, Laura, have you thought that maybe he just loves life? And I hadn't thought of that lens. And watching my dad, how much he loved life at 78, he had over 400 people came to his funeral because people, he just impacted him so much. And so I realized, and so we had a lot of conversations about that. I think it honestly just comes down to, I just love life. I love feeling the energy of the world, and what is it that we can do next.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode. Today, I am featuring Miss Laura R. Young-Shehata. Did I pronounce that correctly?
You did, yeah.
Perfect. She is a respected leader with over 30 years of experience in healthcare and IT, and she specializes in executive leadership, global digital transformation, and hospital operations with a focus on strategic planning and IT systems implementation. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Health and Arts and a Master of Science in Business Administration from St. Francis University. She is ARRT certified in radiology, mammography, and quality management, and has a Six Sigma Green Belt training. And beyond her professional accomplishments, she is very involved in many other aspects of her life, including being a docent for Eaton Canyon Nature Center and a steward for the San Gabriel Mountains. She served on the board of directors for the Boys and Girls Club and is an active member of several professional organizations. In addition to being an accomplished public speaker and public author, she's traveled extensively, exploring over 40 countries, which was fascinating to me. And she enjoys outdoor adventure, has a passion for technology and cars. So it is my pleasure to feature her on the podcast today.
It is so nice to meet you. For those of you that don't know, I know your father well, and it's one of these, as kids grow up, it's amazing to see. I think you might be smarter than your dad, so I'm kind of excited.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far just yet, but he's definitely someone I look up to. He's done amazing things in his life, and I hope to emulate that in some way as we go forward. But cool. So, how you been recently? What have you been up to in terms of work or life in general?
So work was crazy at the beginning of the year. We had this thing called a cyber event, and I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. However, I was able to mobilize. I realized I'm a wartime leader, not a peacetime leader. So that's work's calming down. And as telling you yesterday, I had a new grandson born yesterday. So he's the ninth grandson in our family, and he was born early, but he's a fighter. His name's Axel. So that's been a fun last 24 hours.
Amazing. How would you describe the difference between leadership in wartime and peacetime? I know they could be really different as there's so many different factors and nuances that play. So how would you describe the difference there?
Yeah, I think peacetime leaders, and I'm not going to, insult anyone's intelligence by going down a history lesson, but I think peacetime leaders, there's a time and a place, and then you start to people that really can handle calm and don't get bored, I guess is the right. From being a wartime leader, and I this has been since I've just young age. I've got four siblings, and my dad was always say, "Hey, we can't wait till whatever milestone happens, so Laura can take over. And I just thought that was normal, that, in chaos, that you're peaceful. And so I think someone who is a wartime leader is someone who can read the room and understand what people need. And what people need is the calm factor. You need a vision, you need to be able to mobilize. And I think that's something that you're gifted with when just like people like chocolate or don't. I think that's something that's just inherent in your personality.
Amazing. So you'd say that you've always felt comfortable in the chaos from early on.
Yeah, and when I was in fourth grade, they called me the boss, and that was not cool when I was in fourth grade. As you refine your leadership skills and it becomes leadership instead of bossy, then I think that's part of the leadership that you have to learn. But yes, I think it's inherent, and I think it's learning how to really fine tune that skill the more you mature in your career.
Amazing. Yeah. I know that I think looking at my own life and other people I've spoken with, I think being comfortable in chaos is difficult. I just think that you're kind of overriding all the emotions in your brain and you're trying to find some kind of stability or like try to be logical when there's so much going on. So what do you think are some of the skills or ways you can develop more of that comfortability? Like what helps you to kind of be sane in that chaos?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. I was conducting an interview right before this call for a network engineer, and he was telling me about being ADHD and how he calms his mind. And so I joked with him. I said, I think I'm undiagnosed ADHD, because for me it was just always normal to be able to manage multiple priorities. And I think as you fine tune kind of your question, there is understanding who you are and how people relate to you. I think I'm an empath, so I usually can read people's personality in a room. But I think that's the biggest part, is understanding in times, and whether that's the president of the United States or whether that's your CEO or whether that's an instructor, is reading the room and knowing if people are keeping up and they're following. It's the human connection that that I think it takes, and I think fine tuning that just to pay attention to your surroundings is probably the most important.
Amazing, yeah. And I think the way you describe it, it's kind of become an innate part of your nature that you don't think too much about it. You're just kind of able to
It's
do
kind of
it.
happens.
Yeah. I mean, when you think back to some examples where you're in a leadership setting or you're in this kind of meeting and you're able to kind of read that energy off of people, even though it's something that might be more natural to you now, is there anything in particular you look at in people when you're able to tell that they're not paying attention as much or they're not as engaged? Like what do you think you can kind of sense in them when you feel that kind of energy?
Yeah. I think there's I mean, your entire life you've had technology. I think there's a pre-technology and a post-technology piece to that. So I'm gonna give you a pre-technology example, and then I'll get to post-technology. As you were talking, the first thing that came to mind was the morning of 9/11. And so at the time, I was a radiology director at our county hospital, and I was running behind, and I was in the car, and I was calling my one of my managers, like, hey, I'm going to be there. I'm late. And she says, Laura, do you know what's happening? And said no. And she goes, turn on the news and listen to the radio, and you're fine. Like, we're fine. And that gave me a moment in the car, because I was frantic. I'm running late, and I was frantic, and I turned on, and right when I turned on the radio in the car is when the second tower fell. And I think it's interesting because I was able to hear the audio version of that, which was way more powerful than the visual of that, because the audio, you could hear the gasp of the announcer. So that gave me a moment to recenter myself. And I knew at that point, I'm a leader. I knew I had, was working, I had patients, the whole work. When I walked into the hospital, everything was silent. And walking into the waiting room, I had patients that were staring at the TV. I had employees that were out staring at the TV, and reading that room and just knowing what they needed from me was someone who was calm without all of us knowing what was happening. And that's a really dramatic example, but it was very much of that prayerful, meditative moment in the car walking in. And I think that power that day, I'm really proud of how it. I was pretty young in my career at that point in time, really proud of how that day went, and proud of, made my office open and his work. And it's a little bit of watching the news, but not obsessing about the news, and knowing what everybody needed. There were people. I had one gentleman who worked for me who was from New York, and he came in, and I said, go home. I mean, it was just knowing, go home, we got you, and covering that side. I think post-technology is an interesting proposition. I have 5 daughters. I was the Girl Scout mom when they were small. And what I would do is, back before it was even a thing to say mindfulness, I had a basket on my dining room table. When they came in, the Girl Scout kids would have to put their phones in the basket. And this conscious effort to be mindful, because you don't really know what's happening on the phone. And I had, a couple of my daughters who got themselves in trouble, and I had a counselor who I went to, like, what am I doing wrong as a mom? And the counselor said, look, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. She was, it's kind of like when you were a kid, Laura, your mom would look through your backpack and she would know if you were in trouble. You had, maybe someone gave you a cigarette, or you had a note from a boy, or whatever else. That is now all contained in this one phone. And so the way that I read the room, whether it be my family or someone that I work with, if we're sitting at dinner and they're buried in their phone, and there's something happening over there that either a cycle needs to be broken, or giving them the opportunity, to talk. I had a leader, and she was a high-ranking leader about 2 years ago. We were sitting in a meeting and not paying attention to a really important decision making, and it was that same thing. So finally, I took a break in the meeting and said, "Hey, can we talk?" And I said, "Are you okay over there?" And she had, her dad was getting ready to be sent to hospice, and I said, "You probably just go take a break. We got this, right? We got it." So it's that technology means that we're both in the same physical space, but we're in different mental spaces sometimes.
Mm. Yeah, that's incredible. I guess the phone has become so natural as a part of our lives that we never think too much about it. But I guess that's something I'll pay attention to more when I'm looking at other people. But the 9/11 story is definitely fascinating to me because I've heard many different people, and I've talked to them, like their perspective on the 9/11. I've even talked to like certain firefighters that were able, not participating there, but like who can understand that perspective of it. And I know that there's just so many people that play even on the service end of things, whether it's the healthcare side or the firefighter side. And since I was never there myself, I guess I can't really understand the extent to how it feels because we kind of just hear the number or hear the stat, and that's all we
Yeah.
understand. But I just want to understand more like what it was like that day because I know that it seems that your immediate response to chaos is the calmness, but has the chaos ever been too much? Especially when there's so much uncertainty that you don't really know what's going to happen.
Yeah. I'm gonna not answer your question first, and then I'm gonna answer your question. When you look back and you have children, yours will be, you have plenty of those moments in your life, and COVID is probably a really good example of that. That's unprecedented, and all of a sudden, and when they're asked, how did you handle that, right? There are moments in my life. I remember the day that Princess Diana was killed, and we had the TV on and we're watching around the clock. One of the things, and I'll tell you what, I didn't handle chaos well was when Elizabeth Smart was kidnapped. And I don't know if you know who Elizabeth Smart is, but
I'm not sure.
in right around 1999, maybe 2000, she was lived in Utah, and was kidnapped from her home. My daughter Miranda
Just
was
sorry to cut you off, but is she just like a normal civilian or was
she's
she
a
like
normal civilian, a
okay?
little bit civilian, from a big family in Utah. My oldest daughter was 3 years old at the time, and the story was fascinating. And the way her family mobilized around that was to really get out in the media and try to find her. And so around the clock, I had the TV on. It was like, and we're watching and we're listening and we're paying attention. And what I didn't do as a mom is pay attention to, I had a 3-year-old daughter who was watching a kid that just got kidnapped, who was absolutely terrified. And so then it was like, oh my gosh, like my curiosity and my whatever, because I'm comparing these two ages. Um, my daughter still to this day has a fear of being alone. She has a fear of being near windows. She has an irrational fear of being kidnapped, and so much so she's the one who had the baby last night. And I stayed the night with her 2 nights because there is that fear. And so I think some of that is, understanding. Elizabeth Smart, just for your listeners, was actually found safe about 12 years after she
12
had
years, it's a long time.
12 years. And she's been featured in People magazine a couple of times. Beautiful, beautiful young lady, but one that I did not handle well. Related to 9/11. 9/11 would be like my mother's version of the day JFK got killed. I mean, there's things that happen. And I think for me, because I was a young mom at the time, and I was a new executive at the time. I'd been in leadership roles, but I hadn't been in that highest of a role. And and I also at that point had been traveling globally for work. Like I traveled personally, but not globally. So I had friends that were in New York, and I had and the reality of what was happening, and it was such a vile transgression. So it was an interesting day, because then it was two. It was like, do I go pick up my kids from daycare? Do I stay here? And it was probably the first time in my career where I had to make a decision um, between children and work, because there was plenty of times that it was like whatever. But this was one, so I deployed my husband, go pick up the kids, and stayed there, and really feel like that was a powerful moment. It's for those of us that then you live in New York, you've been there, or New Jersey, when you at what the center looks like that's built now. But I will tell you what was really powerful for a long time: the church that they used for kind of the firefighters mobilized was the memorial for about a year and a half. And they had boots on the fence where that were just left there, that firefighters didn't come back to get them because they had died in the event. So I think it's a powerful life. Events happen, whether it's personal, you have friends and family that maybe have sick or have a crisis, or leadership, and those things are ones that you remember. And it's like a you think you remember like it was yesterday. I'm sure details get skewed over time, but it's one I feel like it happened yesterday.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, a lot we can go into there. Just first of all, it's sitting in my mind. What ended up happening to Martha Stewart? Was she just where was she for 12 years when she was missing?
Oh no, Elizabeth Smart. Elizabeth Smart
Oh,
is her.
sorry, I mixed up the
Yeah,
names.
yeah. No worries, no worries. She was kidnapped by a husband and wife who took her into the wilderness. She lived in a camp, was kind of brainwashed that she wasn't loved, and she was brainwashed that that she was the new partner. So as for this husband, so the husband and wife kind of abused her, and she served as a pseudo wife for all of the time that she lived in the wilderness.
Wow, that's insane.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy story, but I'll tell you, our family is very identified with it, because again, that was what I did not handle good.
Mhm.
Be clear, I was not a good mom on that
It's okay. I
one.
mean, we just learn from experience. And I'm sure like everyone is a new parent. Like there's so much going
Yeah,
on. So it's hard to
yeah,
handle such a new thing. But I think the what your story with your daughter is really interesting because it really just highlights something so fascinating about the brain and trauma, like how like moments in our childhood just get registered in a way, and they kind of just live in our brain for the rest of our lives. And I think whenever we have those like intensely emotional events, our brain just has a way of like storing that and like bookmarking that and making sure we never end up going there again as a survival mechanism. But I don't know if you had any more thoughts over that, because that to me is just really fascinating.
well, I'll tell you, I do have. So on Netflix, they have a show called Things Explained. And it's actually, and you'll appreciate this with your Indian descent, is how I learned how to play cricket. And I learned the rules of cricket because one of their first episodes is Things Explained, and they explain the game of cricket. It's also how I learned marijuana, because I mean, I was like, what is the difference between these different strains? So they do it in a way that it's things that you should know, but you don't know. One of the things they did was Things Explained around memories. And using 9/11 as example, and then I'll come to it to kind of in general with trauma. In 9/11, they had interviewed two different people around their memories of the event. And one girl was in high school and remembers very vividly, and took a lie detector test, remembers very vividly looking out the window of her high school and seeing the towers fall. There's no way that that was physically possible, because she was miles away from it. But she, in her mind and memory, one of the television things she saw, she remembered that. There was also another one that had vividly remembered flying out the next day and flying to be with her mom. Again, that's not physically possible that could happen, because the airports weren't open. But their memory, that is exactly. And so I think what's interesting about trauma, but also about life in general, is how memories work. And I think that's where where people get scarred. I mentioned it. So I come from a big family. I've got 4 siblings, and I've joked before that if it rains, my older sister, she's going to be like, oh, the rain, and she's going to be like, this is the best, and I'm going to make a rain jacket, and I'm going to be like, oh, look, like, let's go play in the rain, like, this is cool. My brother will be like, where's the rain? And then my younger sister would be like, it's rained and it ruined my hair. And then my youngest sister would be like, well, let's go out and build a ditch and cook and do whatever, because we have to do something with the rain, right? So you have these 5 different personalities that handle a thing like rain very different. And I think that's kind of intuitive to where that works. I think that's how you determine where good leaders and maybe not so strong leaders come from, is how they handle each of those, and how they remember events as they
Yeah.
go.
That's amazing. Yeah. I'm not sure if you know the work of Dr. Paul Conti, but I was reading some of his work and he studies trauma. And I think that's when I first learned about the concept that your memories are not objectively true, but they're kind of designed in a way to protect you, which is
Yeah.
really cool because maybe they very clearly remember seeing the buildings fall, but that's kind of a way of their brain changing their memories of the past to make sure that they never end up in a situation like that again. And I
Yeah.
think that after like they gave a lot of examples of people that were traumatized by car accidents and how people that were got into a car accident after they recovered, they have memories of the fact that they never enjoyed driving, which is really crazy because people that who knew them, relatives who told them that you've always enjoyed driving, but after that accident, some people's memories completely shift and they feel like I've never enjoyed driving in the first place. And I think because of that, like it's really I think the brain is a crazy place, and sometimes I look back like how many of my memories are actually real, and like
I
the
have
memories
two
start to fade with
responses to
time.
that. Two responses I think you'll love. One, so my husband was born in Alexandria, Egypt, and moved to the States when he was 5 and became a citizen when he was 9. Something around, and first of all, Egyptians are exaggerators, if you, which I love, 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 love. They're the best storytellers in the world. But with him, when he tells a story, sometimes the facts are so wrong. And I don't know. We've joked like, is it because Arabic is his first language? Is it because English is his second language? Is it because they in general are storytellers, or is it just he remembers because in that time frame when he was coming to the States was so different? So your viewers won't see this, but I'll show this to you. I got this tattoo on my hand right here. And what this is like it's a play, it's a
Yeah,
rewind, it's pause. And so when he gets into one of those stories, I'm like, pause. Like, because what will happen is if I don't pause the story, that becomes the new truth. And it's just because your memory, kind of registers that side of the house. The other thing I was gonna tell you on memories, when I was he's talking about car accidents. When I was 5, my we lived in Utah and we were considering moving to Colorado. My dad was driving and hit black ice in Colorado. It was back in the day when look we didn't have to have seatbelts. So my brother, who was 6 months old, was on my mom's lap. She was breastfeeding. My sister and I were in the back playing Barbies, and the accident happened. Now, what I remember about that accident is 3 things, and I don't remember anything else. I remember one being really, really, really cold, and they were lifting my mom's leg up on our suitcases. They were afraid she was going to lose her leg. She didn't. She had to have surgery, but and it's bleeding. And all I remember thinking, and in the most selfish way as a 5-year-old, was she's getting blood all over my clothes. Like I wasn't even like registered. Like, and I still remember that feeling like that, and I feel selfish about it. Like, she's getting blood on my clothes. And then they had a truck driver who sees these 3 kids. I mean, there's an 8-year-old, 5-year-old, and a 6-month-old, and we're standing by the side of the road, they're taking care of my mom, and he put us into the bank of his semi truck, and the guy was being nice by turning the heat up, but I remember I was so cold, and then it was so hot. And it was so hot in there, like I was sweating, and I'm holding my brother, and now I'm realizing my mom is hurt, and I just started to cry because I didn't know how to tell him to turn the heat down. Like I just remember. And then the last what I remember is when my dad was bringing her home, he bought a custom van. So she had to stay in the hospital for 9 months in Colorado. So I was 6 years old at that point in time. And he bought this custom van. We went to go pick her up, and it was against medical advice, but she'd been gone for a long time. And my dad took all 3 of us and put us on the top of the van. And I remember standing on the top of the van, cheering for my mom, like she's coming home. But all of the rest of the event, I don't remember at all. I don't remember any of it. It was because the trauma just blocked, like it just blocked what
wow.
happened. I was so happy for her to come home. So
It's
yeah.
incredible, yeah. And I think the thing you're talking about with stories, like sometimes you tell yourself a story so many times it becomes true in your brain as well.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Isn't that
Yeah,
funny how that works? It's
yeah,
amazing.
it's
Sometimes
crazy.
I'll look back, I'm like, now, did that really happen? Like, I think it did. Then I have to go look for pictures. I'm like, oh, yeah, that did happen.
And I think that I know you do a lot of like interviews and you speak to people all day with your job. So sometimes you end up speaking in stories. I feel like we can go into that, that's true or not. And that's definitely true when I'm talking about podcasts. And sometimes I tell a story so many times where I start to wonder, like, is this just a story? Like, did that actually happen? Because all of a sudden you look back at your life and like everything like fits some perfect storyline. But yeah.
You know what's funny about my father, who passed away a year and a half ago, who was bigger than life, an amazing, amazing human. He was a big storyteller, and he was really good, especially the last 6 years of his life, he was in the hospital. He was really good at getting the nurses to respond because he would, he had the same stories. And so as his backup caregiver, I was there a lot. The nurses would come in and he had the same speech all the time that he said, there's two types of nurses. There's those that give a shit and there's that don't. Are you a give a shitter? And so I would watch and be like, okay, Dad, you've already said that to this nurse. She goes, I have. I'm like, yes, you have. Like you repeated that one over and over again. And I do the same. I hate it when I'm like talking to a friend. I'm like, did I tell you this already? Because you do get the stories the same stories that get repeated. So
Amazing. Yeah, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier on where you felt like you had to make a decision between work and your children.
yeah.
And I think knowing that there's a lot of other aspects of your life that you're passionate about in addition to work, including like being outdoors and other projects you work on, how would you say you balance the different pillars of your life? And you could start with the broad level of, I guess, your family and your work, but you can also like downstream that into all the other things that you do in your life. How do you th believe that you're effectively able to balance all that you do?
I'm going to start with super cliche because I hate it, and then I'll give you the raw answer. They have this whole cliche that when you're on an airplane, if there's a problem, you have to put your oxygen mask on first. You've heard that one. I remember the first time I heard that, it actually meant something to me because at the time I didn't, and so that's why I think it's so cliche now. I think the biggest part of as you mature in both personal and professional is understanding your limits. I had a goes back like 2006. I was going through a divorce with my ex-husband and it wasn't healthy. It was crazy. I would like literally I would cry all day long and then I would tell people I had allergies and I could function at work and I kind of would go back and forth between the two. I finally went to my boss and said, hey, I need to take some time off. And she said, okay. And I said, and she goes, for how long? And I said, I don't know. And so I wound up taking 6 weeks off of work to kind of, get myself back in a place because I was really kind of messy. When I came back, one of the most amazing leaders, because I love when a leader is actually tells you how it is and is bold with you. And she goes, Laura, I'm glad you took the time off. I'm glad you're back. I'm glad it's good. She goes, but one of the things I'm going to teach you about yourself and not leadership is knowing when your breaking point is. And that was so powerful because I was trying to be all things to all people. And ever since then, I really have tried to very listen, what is my breaking point? As you know, I do a lot of outdoor. I mean, a lot of outdoor stuff. That is for me where I know if I'm having any type of breaking point, whether it's I need to solve a work problem, whether it's you know, even if I'm not feeling well, if I go reground myself outside, then I can conquer the world. And my family work people know that about it. So I think it's knowing how you recharge yourself and that some people do that in a building of a church. For me, I do that by the waterfall by my house. So health and exercise and outside gets prioritized first most of the time because I do know it will reground me to what I need. I also, and being here with my grandson is a good example of prioritizing. There was a really big meeting in Chicago this week. It's an operations meeting for my company. So all the vice presidents and above are there. When I got the phone call on Saturday, and my daughter, so the baby's 6 weeks early. I get the phone call that, hey, what happened? So it was again very common chaos. Like, here's what you need to do: call the doctor, call your husband. So I was kind of gauging it all weekend long, and my husband said to me, he goes, Laura, you have to go to Chicago. And I go, no, I don't. And he goes, what? And I go, the last thing I need to do is go to Chicago, which is going east when I need to go, I need to go west. Like, it's not going to happen. And the benefit I have is I work for a Catholic organization that prioritizes that too. And so I further said to my husband, I said, you don't understand, if I'm at the meeting and something happens, my company will actually hold that against me that I made the decision to be there instead of be with my daughter. And so it was the right thing to do. I mean, because she wound up having the baby on Tuesday, and which was way earlier than we all thought, but I was able to be here in that moment. And so there's a lot of lessons in that, is understanding and knowing what's the priority, but also selecting, an employer that supports your same value system. And
Yeah, it's great. It's great that the values align so perfectly over
yeah.
there. Would you describe your energy that you seem to have a lot of clarity on the way you want to balance things now? Would you say you've had that from the beginning? And especially if you go back to the first incident when you were going through that divorce and someone came and told you that you need to identify your breaking point. Was your response to that immediately positive, or was there some resistance to that at first and did it take time to really develop that?
Yeah, I would say I have been a positive person my entire life. I and and maybe sometimes too positive, meaning not seen at the detriment of my own health. So and I think there's decades that I've done really well, and there's decades I haven't done really well. I will tell you, with my first marriage, for example, I did a fabulous job destroying the marriage because I would just work. I would go work and not address the issues that were happening. I also didn't do a good job with my circle of friends of really being honest about how I felt. Had a really good, very positive appearance with a face. If you go back and you look at pictures, my eyes were flat. I mean, you can kind of see that. It's interesting because, by the way, he was there yesterday during the birth of the baby, and we get along just fine. But then I called my husband now, who's the love of my life, and said, "I'm so happy we're married," right? Like, it's because we're making the right choices. Um, it's taken a while, honestly, and because I don't want to be Pollyanna about it, being about knowing if I'm getting to a place where I I'm having a breaking point. Like, and the breaking point can come in all different perspectives. In fact, my husband, we were on a cruise to Alaska recently. We're kind of sitting there looking at the wilderness, and he said, he goes, "Laura, I think you should do a TED Talk." And I was like, "Oh, I would love to do a TED Talk." And he goes, "Well, what would the topic be?" And I go, "I don't know. Let me sleep on it." And so I woke up clear as day, and it's the TED Talk would be around having trusted advisors. And I think that fits into the positivity side of the house, is that you need to have someone that's a trusted advisor that you can talk to, and you need to make sure that there may be a trusted advisor for different things. I mean, my husband is a trusted advisor because he knows my raw and how I think on a couple different, but I also have, I think of different partners or vendors or coworkers that I know, they know all of the situation, and I'm not going to violate someone's trust by sharing it. And they will be honest with me that says, no, that's not the way to do. And I think it's important. You don't want to have someone who's always your cheerleader. You want someone who will bring you up, but also be honest about, and kind of in a discernment, the way that you think through. I'm not perfect. I wish I were perfect. I am, but I'm way better on knowing that and being able to, take care of myself first so that I can take care of others.
Amazing, yeah. Would you say with time you've felt as if you've not come close to that breaking point at all, or you've just gotten better at recognizing when it's about to happen? Like you see it kind of on the way, so you're able to handle that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. But one of the things I love about Elon Musk is he pauses and stops to make sure he gives the right answer. So that's what I'm doing. I'm doing an
I
Elon
did notice
Musk.
that, yeah. He does
I
take a
make
while.
sure it's
Yeah.
the right answer. It's probably what I haven't shared out loud, which, so kind of be careful on that. Um, this whole thing with mental health and with anxiety and whatever else, I don't, I'm woman, here we roar. I don't think I ever had a problem. It wasn't until I had my first child and I look back now, that the responsibility of feeding her really caused anxiety. Didn't realize that until later, right? But I would have those moments. There was a moment in 2015 when I actually thought I had throat cancer. I mean, I'm one of those things that you look back that was probably this irrational, but my voice was changing. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't even wear a turtleneck because I was struggling. So I went into an ENT doctor, and they'd done tests, and he finally said, "Well, if you don't like your voice, you can have we can do speech therapy." And I was like, "No, there's something's wrong." And he says, "Well, maybe it's anxiety." And I remember laughing, going, "It is not anxiety." And then I was in a work situation that triggered it, and I started to not breathe. And all of a sudden, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is anxiety." Like I can't believe the physical body will manifest itself that way. So I went out of the building, and I called my husband. I go, "I don't know if I should laugh or cry." And he goes, "What?" I go, "I think it is anxiety." And so that moment was really, really powerful, because at that moment, I now know if I'm physically starting to manifest it, that's where the outdoors comes, right? Am I a super anxious person? The answer is no, but I do internalize, and I do care about people, and I care about the way these occur. So that's that pause moment. If I feel it all, like, okay, there's a stress thing, what's causing that? And just taking a step back, recognizing those signs. And I think that's across the board, that's advice I'd give to everyone, is recognizing when you're at that place where you're like, okay, I gotta take a break.
Amazing. Yeah. I think we're all slightly anxious to a degree. I mean, ever
Yeah.
since I'm pretty sure even our ancestors felt that so much. It's designed for survival, so it makes sense. But
Yeah.
I think the difference is that some people, I guess, find the things that help them synergize in a way. Like it seems that for you, the nature and being outside, it's not an added task on the list. It's more brings balance to your whole life. So I think people that I've met all have kind of that are doing pretty well and happy and fulfilled all have that method of finding something in the day that helps them synergize, like whether it's like the 2 hour workout in the evening or just like I love hiking outside. I love being in nature. And I guess there's also the macro and micro levels of it because like the gym is like something on a micro level that I'll do every day. But I guess taking those 2 weeks of hiking trips throughout the year is like a macro level of synergizing. So I think it's amazing that you're able to find something that helps you bring balance to everything. And when has hiking and everything been a part of your nature from the beginning, or is that something you discovered later on in life?
Yeah, so I was born in Utah and so lived really close to the Wasatch Mountains. In fact, every time I go back to Utah now, every time I land, I text my mom and I'm like, I love the Wasatch Mountains. But I spent a lot of time outdoors, when I moved from Utah to Arizona when I was 17, but so being outdoors and it was just normal. It was natural. There was, I mean, I'm not a runner anymore because of my knees, but I used to run and I remember like when it was really cold, that burn that you get in your lungs, like that was more addictive to me than the runner's high. And then, moved to Arizona, I was 17. We have a canal system here that you can walk just about anywhere, like you kind of walk. And I made the rule when I moved here that I couldn't run or go if it was over 106 degrees, which sounds ridiculous, but it's kind of did that. I hiked less here because it you have to really get early, and I kind of miss that side of the house, but was always outside. My house that I had when I lived in Arizona full time, because I'm in California now, but when I lived in Arizona was the entire backyard. I mean, I had the basketball court and the pool and the hot tub and the fire pit and the outdoor kitchen and the playground for the kids, because that was just really, really being outside. And that was my safe haven. Moving to California has really helped me reconnect. I live in the San Gabriel Mountains, which is very similar to the Wasatch Mountains. I work so I live in Pacific time zone, but I work on Central time zone. So I'm in front of my computer routinely at 5:30 a.m., but that means I'm done by 2:30 or 3. And at 3, I'm leaving my house, and 2.8 miles from my door is a waterfall. It's the Eaton Canyon waterfall. And it is that reconnection. So it's like one that I've always had it. Like I've always loved it. It's always being outdoors has always been a priority. I've always said that's my religion, is being outside. But the last 4 years living there has really reinforced that. I've done not as many cool hikes as you, but I've done some pretty cool hikes. I did the Camino pilgrimage last September, the
Where's that?
September 20th. Oh my gosh, you have to do this. It's so the Catholic Church has a pilgrimage that you can do it a couple different ways. You can do the Portuguese way, which is about 200 kilometers, or you can do just coming from Spain, which is about 100 kilometers, or you can come from the border of France, so which is 1,000 miles. So
Wow.
I have been on my bucket list for forever. And you hike, walk for that amount of time. You have to do at least 100 kilometers to get a certificate from that you did the pilgrimage, and then you end in Santiago at the cathedral, and it's amazing experience. I did the 100. It was about 118 kilometers that I wound up
How
doing. So
much time did that take you?
it took me 4 days. I had
Okay.
I'm a speed walker. I'm a destination walker, so I probably walk as fast as some people run. My fastest walking pace is 13:03. I tore my Achilles in February, so right now I'm at 14.5 for my walking, but I can walk pretty fast, so I kind of walked that. I joined a girlfriend and her husband. Her husband did the 1,000 miles. He started in France.
Wow.
She did 500 miles, and then I joined them in Galicia, Spain, and did 118. So it was a
Yeah.
life-changing, amazing experience. It's really
It's
cool.
incredible. Yeah. I've never done overnight hikes yet. That's something on my bucket list. I guess like I honestly really only got into hiking the last couple of years, so we've been doing a lot of day trips, but that's definitely on my bucket list of things to do. And I think that sounds like a great option to start with.
Yeah, it's
Amazing.
awesome. You're going to Fiji and next, right? So are
No,
you
we're
Japan?
going to Japan. We're going to Japan in
Japan,
December. Yeah.
Japan.
Oh, we'll be visiting the Smokies and Thanksgiving. That's like the main big one I'm
Oh,
looking
I'm
forward
so
to.
excited.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait to see pictures. That's exciting.
Amazing, yeah. So it really jumped out to me when I was reading your bio and you said that you visited 40 countries. So I really want to dig into that. Like, what are some of the most fascinating insights you've gained from just traveling around and some of the best experiences you've had?
Absolutely. So my father was vice president of sales in the US. And so we traveled a lot. By the time I was by the time I was 12, I had seen every state in the United States.
Wow.
And he was super fun. Like he'd get points and we'd get to pick to where we go. And so when I got to pick first to go, I picked New York. I was 15 at the time and picked New York because I wanted to see Bloomingdale's and I wanted to see New York Stock Exchange. So that was kind of my first exposure to more of an international type feel, right? Like New York is not, but that was my first experience. And so I had made the decision at that point in time, I just wanted to travel the world. So my dad took me to Mexico thinking that was going to be, that would curb my, and I didn't. So when I was 18, my boyfriend at the time was got a scholarship to go to Aix-en-Provence in France to do an art school. And so he called me and he says, we should go backpack Europe. And for whatever reason, that sounded like a great idea as an 18-year-old. I wish I would have been more honest with my parents about what I was doing, because I left and didn't call my mom for 3 weeks. I would kill my children. Let me be clear if they did that. But so we at 18, and with our plan was about $20 a day. So we were sleeping on trains and we were eating cucumbers and bread, and but that was really my exposure to independence. And I remember when I was on that trip, there was two things that really kind of stood up. One, we were in Germany and I was trying to figure out how to do the laundry. I packed a backpack, but it was like a school backpack. It wasn't like a regular backpack. And I'm trying to figure out how to do the laundry. And I was kind of sitting there, couldn't read German. And this US GI Army guy comes in and had taught me how to do the laundry. And so I remember that moment of, again, it's kind of that trusted advisor. When you are in somewhere where you don't know the language, look for someone who you can trust, because you have to trust and do that. That can help you through that. The second thing that happened is we were in Italy, and that's not true. We were in Paris. We were in Paris, and we were trying to check into a hotel. And I speak Spanish, muy poquito, but I do speak Spanish. And I'm trying to talk to this person in French, which I don't know French at all, and somehow slipped into Spanish because I'm thinking native tongue Spanish. I have broken Spanish. He has broken Spanish. And so the two of us were speaking broken Spanish with it and kind of connected in the world. And I remember that moment being, people that want to communicate will figure out how to communicate. I mean, that's my favorite. I will tell you, of all of my travels, and I've done lots, the one that was the most powerful for me was the first time I went to India. And so we flew into Bangalore. We were in the south and wanted to go hiking. So we went hiking near Nandi village. There's a hike it's a sunrise hike. And we get there and they had said it was easy to moderate. So I just had my Skechers shoes, which were absolutely the wrong shoes to wear. And starting to walk up. So walking up, there was it was dark and there was a lot of people there. It was probably more
Was it because
people
it was early in the morning? Is that why it was
it was
dark?
early morning, and it was yeah, so we started at like 3 o'clock in the morning, but it was packed. I mean, it was people to people to people, and one of the hardest hikes I think I've ever done. But we're going, but you're not really paying attention because it's dark, and you get up, kind of get there, and as you're going, people are dropping off. So let's say it started with like 300 people. By the time we got to the top, there was only about 40 of us that made it to the top. And we get there right as the sun was rising. And there's so many parts of this that was just so powerful. One, I'm looking around like these are the people that made it. Like, why did others drop out? What is it that is the human spirit that we continued to go? The second part was they had, a temple that was up there, and I'm thinking it was a really hard hike. How did they bring this up to create the temple? The last part then is we're getting ready to go down. I realized how dangerous it was going down. And because going up, you didn't see it, it was dark, but going down, it was slippery. It was really, and I looked, and one of our guides who was with us, he worked for one of our partner firms. He was also wearing really terrible shoes. And everybody else was kind of like, hey, we're just going to go in there, slip sliding down. And I had made the agreement with myself. I will immerse myself in the culture, and I will not put myself in physical harm, right? Because given my own devices, I will just be adventurous. So this gentleman reaches out and he says, let me hold your hand. And I'm like, no, I'm a good hiker. It's fine. And he goes, well, it's for me too. So I held his hand all the way down the mountain. It took us almost 3 hours to get down. but we also had the most fascinating conversation. I mean, it was really this being immersed in this beautiful, amazing part of India that very few people go to. And I'm hearing and understanding, because what I didn't understand at the time is that Hindi wasn't the first language. So he's talking about all the different village languages, and he's talking about English is second, Hindi's third, telling me about his wife and his family, and his mom who had recently passed away. And I felt like I had a friend for life. And I think that's the part of traveling these different countries. And again, you have a trusted advisor there. And again, I helped him as much as he helped me. We stayed stable. And I just love the human spirit. Like, we're all different, but we're all kind of the same at the end of it. So,
Yeah, it's great insight. I think whenever you travel, you always kind of realize that everyone lifestyles are so different,
yeah.
and it's just so normal how lifestyles are different wherever you go. And at first, it might be shocking how different it is, but I feel like really quickly you just integrate into that, and it just
Yeah.
becomes normal. And then you go back home and you realize that, oh yeah, I've been living like this
Oh
for so
yeah,
long.
exactly.
So,
Exactly.
what have been some of the craziest cultures or shocking moments you've had just traveling and experiencing different
Um, this was not as shocking, but I'm going to say it because I think you'll be entertained by it. One
things?
of my favorite places was in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And part of it is that we were scheduled to go to, I'm going to say it wrong, Iguazu Falls, if I'm saying that right. And we were scheduled to go to Patagonia. By the time we got there, because we had kind of come down, we'd started in Rio and gone to Uruguay, Paraguay. By the time we got there, we just kind of were over it, just kind of decided to relax and chill. So I was in Buenos Aires doing nothing, which I'm like, go, 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 go. And we'd gone to dinner, and they have red wine, they have red meat, and they have caramel, which are all of my like favorite things. And they have the most beautiful people in the world. And that is the part that I'm not one of these where I'm like, oh my gosh, but I turn to my husband, I'm like, that waiter is really handsome. And then I saw a girl, I go, that girl is really beautiful. He's like, you've never called that out. I go, I know, like even the homeless people are beautiful. So that was probably one of my favorites, like not whatever, the kind of just the fact that there's such beautiful people that are there. I think one of the others I'm trying to think of as probably one of the craziest is when we went to go visit my girlfriend in Budapest. She works for the State Department, and she's retired now, but we would be able to travel and get room and board, and we can travel wherever we wanted to go. We were in nowhere, Eastern Europe, and on a speed train, and we had met a couple who invited us to come to their chalet, and why we said yes to this as adults, I don't know, because we did. So near Vienna, we got off the train, and he took us to his brother's house, and they were having kind of a local party, and they had home brewed some type of alcohol. I'm not sure what it was, but we stayed up all night long, and it was kind of like, it looked like the Sound of Music with the rolling hills and these just really fun, amazing people. And the crazy part of it is that we just really did get to know these people. When I look back to the safety factor, we were safe at all times, but it probably wasn't that safe. We probably shouldn't have done it. And then my girlfriend was really, really mad at me. She's like, you realize I work for the State Department. Like, if I had to come find you, and I'm like, I'm sorry. So that was probably that part of the country. I think is Budapest was one of my probably my favorite places I've traveled to. Lots of history, and the food wasn't fantastic, but it was good. The other one I really loved is Istanbul. Turkey is
Yeah.
when you talk about the smells and the visuals. When we went to the market there, there's just so much that's happened. I think every sense that I have was overused, just between the visual and the smells and everything that came with it.
Amazing. Yeah. Have you ever been to Japan or?
I've not been to Japan.
Okay.
I've not been to Japan. I've not been to I always kind of do go based on what calls me. And I hadn't really been kind of the whole Asia side of the house hadn't really been hit for the calling. We did in for our anniversary in May of 2020, we had booked a trip to China in November, and then for obvious reasons that got canceled.
Yeah.
But that was so no, I've not been to Japan.
Cool. Okay. Um, if you reflect back on some of the more dangerous moments, reflect on a few, but if you had to reflect back to one of the memories you can think back to where you really felt like you're in a pickle, like a really dangerous position. Can you think back to one of those stories or?
Oh yeah. Two that come to mind. The first one, my daughter Miranda, she was 6 months old, and this is kind of not even that big of a deal, but it's one that when I have a fear moment, I think back to this. This was a really dumb move. So my niece was a lifeguard, and she and Miranda loved water, and so my niece would take Miranda and jump into the water with her and then come back out. And so I'm not a good swimmer. I can swim, but I'm not a great swimmer. I had Miranda, I was holding her, and I jumped off the diving board and jumped into, like, it was like, a 10-foot water with her, and then went to go swim. And then I realized as I was coming up, like, this was like, I am not that good of a swimmer to be doing this with her. And now I'm seeing her. And so I've got the 6-month-old baby. And it was just in that moment, because Tracy had been doing, my niece, and so when I got back up and I'm kind of holding the baby up and I'm kind of whatever. And I don't think anyone realized how much harm's way we were actually in, but that is a moment that I've been very, very, very careful with water after that, because I just really hadn't paid close attention to that. So that would, I would say, that's probably one of the dangers. The other danger, and this is not what I'm talking about a lot either, but this is what I would kill my kids. I had, when I was 16 years old, snowboarding just had come out, and snowboarding had come out that, even the ski resorts in Utah wouldn't let snowboarders on the mountain. So my boyfriend at the time was sponsored by a Kemper snowboard, and he snowboarded, and we would hike and then snowboard down and do whatever else. We had decided, I was really good at jumping. I wasn't that great at, like, some of the other things, but I was really good at jumping. And they decided that I was going to jump over his one of his friend's trucks. So on the snowboard, drive it over, and it's a fantastic photo. Like, it's probably one of the best photos I've made in my life, and jumping over. And then I didn't have that great of a landing. When afterwards I thought back to that, like, those are those types of moments that you look back, that could have very easily been, if I had landed wrong, I could have been crippled, and that was
Yeah.
probably not a good idea. That was probably a terrible idea.
So you do mention that sometimes you reflect back on some of these memories and you realize how much risk there might have been involved, but there's something inside of you that maybe is driven to that risk. So how would you describe that, like, internal feeling? Is there something that excites you about, like, challenging yourself or, like, taking risks? Or
Yeah, I it's interesting, because I always kind of walk on the edge. With my children, I have said to them, if there's a plot of grass and it says don't walk on the grass, then my oldest daughter would be like, I can't walk on the grass. Like, she'd be kind of like, and my middle daughter would look at it and she'd tiptoe on it to see if people are looking. And my youngest daughter would just be like, F this, I'm going across the grass. And I'm probably somewhere in between. Are people looking, and like, I'm just going to go across the grass? But I do like to walk on the edge. Given my own devices, I do like to walk on the edge. And I don't know where that comes from. I think it's just an excitement for life. When my dad was ill, I had made that, before he passed away, I had said to my aunt, like, I think my dad's just afraid to die. And she goes, Laura, have you thought that maybe he just loves life? And I hadn't thought of that lens. And watching my dad, how much he loved life at 78, he had over 400 people came to his funeral, because he just impacted him so much. And so I realized, and so we had a lot of conversations about that. I think it honestly just comes down to, I just love life. I love feeling the energy of the world, and what is it that we can do next, right? So it's, but I have learned to not be as, like, I do like speed. I love cars. I just have to be careful. I'm not pushing it too far.
incredible. So with 30 years of experience in healthcare and IT, which is quite a lot of time, what motivates you to come back each day and do the work that you do? What about your work excites you and drives you?
Yeah, absolutely. I started out in healthcare. I was 17 when I went to radiology school. I had to get because of radiation comes with it, I get a special waiver. Radiology, rad techs are similar to nurses. And what happens is, where nurses branch off and learn pharmacology, rad techs branch off and learn physics. And I'm more of a physics nerd than I am, let me learn and memorize drugs. So I was certified as a radiologic technologist working in healthcare at age 20, and was able to really, you see how the operations of hospitals work. And I think what I look back to, my basic motivation goes back to that moment of understanding those caregivers that are at the bedside. How are we impacting them? I got into technology. It was actually interesting. In 92, when I had graduated, there's with healthcare in general, it's interesting. You go through where you have too many nurses or too many radiologic technologists, and then you don't have enough. But in 92, they had kind of froze and weren't hiring any rad techs. And here I am, newly out. My manager came out as a student, and they hadn't offered me a job yet. And she came out and she said, hey, we're implementing this new system, which we now know is electronic healthcare record, but at the time it was the RIS, the radiology information system, the first part of that. And she goes, I don't have any of the techs that can come in and work. Will you, as a student, will you kind of be the trainer? Will you work, do whatever else? Because I don't have the staff. And I think this was the key pivotal moment in life when you're making, kind of a negotiation skill as a kid, like, well, I'll do this. So I said to her, I said, look, I will work all weekend long. It was the equivalent of working 4 days straight. I said, I'll sleep in the doctor's lounge, I'll do whatever else. I said, but what I want is for you to cross train me in a couple of modalities, mammography and a couple different things. And she said, okay. And so I worked around the clock and I was exhausted. But what happened is I learned the computer system when everybody else didn't. And they were there just kind of struggling with whatever else. And by the end of those 4 days, I could change all of the labels on the printer, and I could troubleshoot the different screens, and I could do whatever else. And that was really my entry into technology without intending to. But what I realized as I was moving into these different roles was that when I'm at the bedside, I can make the difference for one patient. When I'm doing technology, I can make the difference for lots of patients. And I'm some people can do things at scale, some people can't. I'm really good at doing that at scale. And so that's what motivates and drives me is I still go back to, I have those patients that I met when I was in my 20s, and I've got a big family. I've had a husband who was in crisis. I've had a dad, I've had siblings. So knowing and understanding what it takes to support them at the bedside. I also, I have, 3 daughters and 2 stepdaughters. Three of the five are in healthcare, and I know that I'm helping support what they're doing. And it's everyday small things. The small things get big things after a while. So that's where that
Amazing.
happens.
So really driven by like the impact you can have at a large scale to
Yeah,
many people.
yeah.
Amazing. I think when we look at like the healthcare system right now, like the big healthcare networks are really what drives like a lot of healthcare systems in America. And I'm really curious how it's evolved with time, like what it was like 30 years ago. Because I think right now it's very well organized and there's structures around it. And there's like central companies that manage hospitals across the entire nation. So what was it like 30 years ago, and how does it like change as well as like technologies continue to develop with time? Like what are some of the biggest changes you've seen?
I think the biggest thing I've seen is around physicians, and I think I'm not a doctor, have lots of doctor friends, not a doctor. I think the as a physician, most of the people that come out, they are the high achievers in high school. They're the ones who, they were probably the quarterback. They were probably the student body president. They were probably the valedictorian, and they're told you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer. They pick doctor and really don't understand or know maybe what that really means, right? I think the families push there. And so I think part of that is what's evolved over time with the physicians is there's a conscious choice for those that want to be in healthcare or not.
Mhm.
Because, a lot back then where, my family put into it. And quite frankly, if you're a physician because you're the smartest one in the room and you don't understand patient care, that's difficult. So I think that's number one. I think the second thing I would say is the physician groups. Not only do you have to be smart and understand and know, and the way physicians work is you learn one, you do one, you teach one. And so that you don't always have the answers, but you have to be confident and have the answers. And so learning that skill and getting compliments all the time, you're saving people's lives, or someone's dying, there's emotion. And so you're getting this constant affirmation and feedback. If a physician then decides to go into administration, can you imagine like the grief they go through not getting compliments every day? Now they're having to troubleshoot. So I think what's happened is a really clear, those that are physicians that go into leadership and administration, there's a clear decision versus that is a career path. And some of those that stay in medicine that want to, there's also creating partnerships with hospitals, where before a lot of being a businessman is different than being a physician. And that was, anyone who had their single shop and hung up a shingle, you think back to way back in the day when they were doing house calls. That is doing house calls for the love of medicine is very different than I have to set up a business to make money from it. So I think that's evolved, where you've got money managers and business people, and then doctors can be doctors.
Yeah.
As it relates to healthcare systems, I trained as a student at what was Scottsdale Memorial in Scottsdale, Arizona. It became Scottsdale Healthcare. It's now Honor Health. And so what happens there is the evolution over time of this small community hospital and a small community board to a system. And this is what you're saying, we're organized with the Honor Health. And you see that across the country, where they become bigger. The value of bigger is you get stronger buying power. So you get whatever supplies at a cheaper rate. You also get brand and name recognition. It also is better for negotiating with insurance companies to get money back. The negative side to that, and what I've seen over time, is whether you're a holding company, which means we just all came together as a coalition, or operating, where we operate together, it's hard to evolve into to an operating company. It's very much like the U.S. government, right? It's states' rights or national rights. And that's neither one of them is right or wrong. They're just very different. That's why we have the difference between Republicans and Democrats. And so I think that's in healthcare right now, is we're really at a crux with these big systems of, is it national rights? From an enterprise level, you can standardize and you can save money, but is that better for the patients and the physician locally? There may be a reason you do something geographically. So that's what's really, I think we're evolving, looking to now, which was very different than 30 years ago. 30 years ago, it was all about this small community and how do we come together as a community.
Yeah, it's definitely growing in size, and I definitely think that some of the challenges you bring up are definitely nuanced, and I guess with time we'll start to understand
Yeah.
how we can move forward with that. Going back to your first point, I definitely see that a lot. That's definitely in the peers around me. I think maybe 30 years ago, the smartest one in the room became a doctor, but now I guess the job market is changing and where the smartest person in the room really goes. But now when I see friends that are interested in pursuing like pre-med or nursing or just anything related to the medical field, they usually are pretty passionate about it, because to go through all that schooling, like you need to really like love what you do. And a lot of my friends that are going to nursing, they just like helping people. They like working with people. And I think that's definitely a really interesting shift that I definitely see it at my level, at least people around me. But if you look at the future of healthcare, and if we just look at it from like a technology standpoint, what do you think are some of the biggest things we're going to see in the years to come in terms of how technology can help improve both healthcare systems, but even maybe healthcare as a whole, like in terms of, I don't know, cancer diagnosis, or helping to move towards some of the biggest like horseman diseases that we see today? Like, how do you think technology is going to play a role in helping us deal with some of the challenges we face today?
I'm going to start with AI, only because everyone talks AI, and I have a strong point of view there, and then I'll get to a couple others. AI is funny because AI, as you know, has been around for a long time, and all of a sudden you get this whole AI and generative AI, and I laugh because I don't think that's going to be this massive game changer that people think it's going to be. So that's why I would call that out. I do think there are some parts of AI that really has helped physicians. And I'll give you example, like in the OR, you take an image you're in the OR, you take an x-ray, and if you are, in the middle of operating on a person, you can't really look at detail at an x-ray image that you need to. AI can help pull out kind of like, hey, look here. And I think that's important. That helps out. I think if AI is done right, it'll make you smarter. If it's done wrong, it makes you dumber. And so it's really kind of trusting your instincts. And I think those physicians that are passionate use that as to help augment, not to replace. And I think that's when you read a lot of different studies, they'll say, here's where we're going and it's going to replace people. I absolutely do not think it will replace people. I think, when you talk about the electronic healthcare record, which was really, 2006 through 2014 is when most of the hospital systems were implementing the electronic healthcare record. It has helped and it has hindered with patient care. And so the organization I was at before, we were implementing a couple things like, we did Google Glasses, and the whole goal of that one was to stop the doorknob question. And so as a physician, what that is you're walking out the door and they're like, the patient says, oh, by the way, I'm having heart palpitations. And then now you have to turn back around. And so what the Google glasses were doing was being able to have someone transcribe in the background while you're talking to the patient, give them full attention, so you don't have to do that later. But it's also stopping the doorknob question. So someone who's, the transcriber is saying, hey, by the way, last time they were here, their blood pressure is different, ask them blank. So the doctor can say, hey, Laura, I noticed that you're whatever, and you're ahead of it and able to talk to the patient. I think the misnomer for patients is their doctors know and love them. And I think that's the problem is a lot of times doctors may not remember who you are. And so it's having some of that spoon fed to you, either a summary by way of AI or someone behind helping it. I think that's made a huge difference too. I think what EHRs were intended to do, the electronic healthcare record, was to collect data. I mean, it was never meant to improve workflow. It was never meant to really help the patient. What it was meant is for the government and healthcare companies to collect that data to help with research, whether that be, disease recognition, et cetera. I think what you'll see, we now have a lot of data. Things like dementia, we know are likened to more like a diabetes. It's like a later term diabetes of the brain. And so I think that's come from data. I think I don't know that we'll ever be cancer free. I think that the drug and pharma industry gets too much money for that. So I don't know that will change. But I do think some of those we know more. And I think if we can prevent illness from happening, which is a lot more happenings to prevent illness, I think also using technology for the patients to get engaged. I'm the firm belief that a patient has to have an advocate or a patient has to have the caregiver. There's only so much that, a patient's in, let's say as an inpatient, a patient's in the bed and they're sick and their only job is to get better. The care team comes in and their job is to help them get better, but they may not know the whole story. That caregiver is the bridge in between. And technology, we're doing a lot to help enable that caregiver, whether that's feeding information or helping summarize or access to portals. That's why I think if we focus on that middle one, I think that's what's going to transform healthcare.
Interesting. So do we know that dementia is solely caused by diabetes now? Because I know that I was reading that insulin resistance is a big like driving force toward a lot of different diseases, including dementia. So do we
Yeah.
have that as a clear causation effect now, or?
So with diabetes, there's always been two types, right? You have type 1, type 2. And so type 1 being you're insulin dependent and once you're on it, you'll always need it. Type 2 is hey, you need to lose weight and you need to you need to put you on metformin or something and we're going to follow you. What they now, within the last 5 years, there's now what they call type 1.5 or LADA, and LADA is latent autoimmune disorder for adults. And so that 1.5 is, it really comes around autoimmune disorders. Autoimmune disorders are so researched and unknown, and there's so many things that come with that. But so people that have the autoimmune gene for LADA, now you can hold it there. They can be treated like type 2, but once they convert to a type 1, they will always be insulin dependent. So those three are very firm. Here's diabetes and here's the path we're going. Recent studies, now that they have found the autoimmune with this middle one, is that it is in 90-something% of the cases that the people that come up with dementia have that autoimmune disorder. And so there's lots of different studies that are out there. If you look at it, it hasn't been declared as yet, but I think as time moves on and they get more studies in it, that it'll be the fourth one for diabetes for sure.
No, that's incredible. I mean, I feel like the more and more I read, the more and more I'm finding out that everything's related to sugar. So
It's all, I know. Do you eat sugar or are you a non-sugar eater?
I very minimally, like it's something I pay attention to. Like I try to eat a pretty clean diet. So yeah.
Given my own devices, I'll eat a bag of Nerds clusters all day long. So I have to keep it at bay. Like I don't like chocolate or whatever, but like that pure sugar. So, but once I start, I don't stop. So I'm kind of the same. I have to be very careful with it.
Yeah, I mean it's okay. I mean, I think anyone who has the awareness of it and knows it's bad for them will naturally tend to eat less. And I think it's the people who maybe don't know that much knowledge about it and they just happen to eat it every meal. I think that's when it starts to add up. But
Yeah, agreed.
definitely interesting. You mentioned that with the next stage of the healthcare system, prevention is a big theme that we need to make sure we're preventing these diseases. But you also mentioned that it's a bit of a challenge because there's so much money involved, such as with companies like the pharmaceutical industry. So I've definitely seen the different actors at play that are helping us to move toward that next stage of medicine where we can focus heavily on prevention and early screening and basically tools to help us catch it early. Because from what I read, I think the best predictor of whether you'll survive from cancer is how early you get it. And I think that's true for cardiovascular disease, even disease like dementia. And it's fascinating to learn like how a lot of these diseases develop over decades. They just don't just happen randomly when you're 50, like they've been happening from early on. So how do you think that's going to play out, especially considering the amount of money that a lot of these industries have at play? Like, do you think we'll be able to, in the next few decades, move toward a place where we're a lot better at preventing these diseases early on?
Yeah, I think it's a personal choice in a lot of cases. When it like the sugar, for example, I think some of that is personal choice. When you asked about things changed over healthcare in time, I think this is one that's significantly changed because if you look at the way, medicine and you have protocols and you have, if this happens, A, B, C, D, there's a lot more, and I would call it West medicine, East medicine. I think Eastern type medicine does a lot more of, focusing on the inner self, focusing on maybe herbs, maybe not on actual, pills, etc. And there's a strong influence of East medicine in the United States at this point in time. There's a lot of it. It's, again, I would say alternative medicine. I think alternative medicine is matching and I'll give you an example of this. I had gone to an alternative medicine doctor who drew my blood. And if you look at the blood range for normal medicine, I was in the normal range. But if you look at my height, my weight, my family history, etc., then I really probably needed to look at some hormone balancing type things. Normal traditional medicine wouldn't have done that. And I think balancing those hormones, right, is that time when you're starting to go through a change, made a significant difference, but it was more of a personalized medicine. I think when we look, even technology can help with it, that the personalized side of things. And you're seeing lots of companies that are coming out that says, okay, like these are the vitamins you should take. And if
Yeah.
you have, et cetera, I prevention more than anything else. And I think that's, if you're looking at exercise as a medicine, I think if we can get a shift in brain thought to be, rather than I'm going to take a pill because I have high blood pressure, it's what do you need to do to physically change to see if you can. And there are people who have to take high blood pressure medicine, but is there habits you can change either by way of moving your body or eating that can help on that? And I think that more than anything will help be healthier as age. I tell my kids I want to wake up dead, and so I want to just live and live and live and live and then wake up dead. So that's my goal.
Amazing, yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely a societal shift, like an ideology. I think
Yeah,
people are
for
definitely
sure.
waking up to it. Like, I think a lot of people understand now that decisions you make will impact your life later on the road. But I know I've met a lot of people that who don't even understand that as a concept, that they just think that medicine is the answer for everything. And then if I get sick, I'll just use that medicine. So I think definitely a societal shift will be needed there. I think it's already happening. But would you say this rise of Eastern medicine in the West, is this more of a recent thing you're talking about? Like,
I think over the probably the last 10, 15 years,
gotcha.
it's, just really, it's that, and you hear it as, Peter Attia will call it, medicine 2.0. You've heard,
Yeah,
alternative medicine. There's a couple different things with it. I think it's just, for me, that's when I the first saw the influence coming really is, meditation, I think solves probably more than anything else in the world. I think, but again, when I say that, there are times and places when you may need back surgery, maybe need what you do, not some type of preventative yoga. So, I mean, I'm not saying that you don't need it, but I do think there's options to lean into before you. In fact, yesterday I was talking to someone who had neuropathy and had done some research on light therapy. And so did, through Mayo, their doctor had suggested it, did light therapy, and the neuropathy is 95% of the way gone now, which I think
wow.
is fascinating. Like, I haven't had time to go down the medical journal rabbit hole on that one
It's
yet. So
incredible. Yeah,
that'll
I'm
be
gonna look
my,
into that. Yeah. Tell
yeah.
me more about meditation and some of the benefits you've seen. Is that something you consistently do, or is that something you try
I
to?
wish I wish I was better at it. So
Okay.
the answer is yes. When I was 16, my best friend, her mom was kind of ahead of her time in a number of things, and so she would teach us how to meditate. And I remember just being bored by it, like, what are we doing? What is going on? So I, for me, am more about being mindful than I am focus on the meditation side of the house. Just, I am not a early riser, which is funny because when I say I'm in front of the 5:30, but I'm a just in time person. So I will get up, get ready, and I am, I'm ready to go. But part of that is my brain. I solve problems all night long, so I'm ready to go, and then whatever. My quiet time and my mindfulness is usually my winding down at night. It takes a long time to get my brain to relax. And so for me, what meditation is for me, and everybody does it different, is I'm a big bath taker. When I take a bath, that is my moment where I can be mindful and I can just stop and I can be in this body of water and just really practice breathing. Um, there's no phones. Water's the great neutralizer for phones. There's no phones, and my family knows to kind of leave me alone in that space. So I struggle when I'm traveling and there's not bathtubs, because that really is kind of the place where I meditate. But I think it's sometimes that's what it looks like. But for some people, maybe it's just to stop and pause. I have a coworker. She wakes up an hour and a half early every morning and does full-fledged breathing, meditate, in her whatever yoga pose of the day. But I do think it's important to take those moments for yourself.
Yeah, those like moments you can kind of just slow it down is a good way to
Yeah.
put it. I think the warm baths and showers help a lot because they kind of just lower your body temperature and you just feel it's a great feeling like to end your day off. I also do the same thing, but
Yeah.
I guess it's
Yeah.
like I guess there's a way people think about it typically, like the formal method of just sitting down and meditating. But I guess there's so many ways you can add it throughout your day to slow your brain down if that's what the goal is, right? Just going on a walk or just like turning your phone off for a little bit.
Yeah, you know what? I'll tell you the other thing I do routinely is because I travel a lot, so I'm on a plane usually once or twice a week, and there couldn't be a more chaotic place than the airport.
Yeah.
And so I've got and my hair is longer, and so I'll do like very visible headsets, like the old school ones, so they can see that I am not. And as a very giving, open, whatever person, you can't be on stage all the time. You have to step back. So I'll put that on, and a lot of times on an airplane, I will have the earbuds in with no music, no anything, and that'll just be my moment just to just in this, just relax for the first hour of the flight. And that some of my best ideas happen when I have just fake AirPods in. So
It's incredible. I want to go back to a discussion we started but didn't really get to go deep into, which was, I guess, the AI's role in healthcare and just the job market in general.
yeah,
So you basically expressed that you don't have much fear in job market scarcity per se. And I guess it makes sense because I think AI has become a buzzword in the last few years when generative AI was born. I guess people don't really understand what AI is as well when they um have like limited knowledge about like they use it in some parts of their life, but I guess they kind of just jump to think AI is like a smart human brain and they just like jump, oh, that's so easy to make. Now that we have this, we can just so quickly go to that, which obviously is not true. So I guess for people who don't have much knowledge about like the history of AI and how it goes back, I don't even know how long. I know it sometime in the 1900s. I mean, any kind of algorithm really is an AI if you think about
yeah.
it. So how would you describe like the history of AI, like how it was born and what are its real implications in terms of job market scarcity and just like our world in general?
Yeah, I think from the dawn of technology, you've had some type of AI. And because you use a computer, you learn how you use it, and whether it's programmed by a human or the computer is learning as you go. I think if I were to honestly, probably if I were going to school right now, I would go to school to be a prompt engineer, because I think that is the most fascinating of where technology is at now. And so a prompt engineering being the computer only do what you tell it to do. I think that was the best advice I got when I was learning technology is you program and it does exactly what you tell it to do. And then it kind of the generative side is that it learns along the way. I'll give you a super random example and you can kind of walk down this, but I had a girlfriend of mine who was writing a Christmas card with ChatGPT, which I thought was completely stupid. I was like, why aren't you just writing it? And she had done the whole thing. So I decided that I was going to experiment. So last year for my Christmas card, I did 6 different prompts, right? So I had done that's kind of specific on what was happening, just but not in a clean format, just dumped a bunch of information. And then I did another what I kind of and one that was really, really vague. And then I ran it through ChatGPT. The one that was very specific came up with a really cute poem, actually, that I actually wound up sending out for my Christmas card. It just said, and I said a little bit lazy and a little bit curious. Here it is. I'm not pretending like it's mine. So I think that's where AI has evolved to, and it's kind of vague because this could be a whole podcast in itself.
Yeah.
But is understanding and knowing. Again, if you trust your instincts, it will make you smarter. If you use even if you're writing a paper, and you need to validate whatever else, you only have it makes you better paper if your paper's almost all the way done. And then you're saying, hey, is there a couple words that I can do better here? But if you're asking it to write a paper on something that you don't know anything about and you're prompting it, your instructor is going to be like, dude, go back and do this yourself, right? So I think healthcare is the same way.
Amazing, yeah. Do you think that there is any fear in terms of certain jobs being taken away? Like you mentioned that some people have the belief that all the jobs are going to be gone, and you don't buy into that fear. But do you think there's anything that might become easier with AI quickly? And by quickly, I mean sometime in the next 20 years, do you think? Or
I think it's interesting. If you look back to I was even in your lifetime, if you look back to how technology has evolved to that point in time, and for me, I look back to phones where the English is at the simplest level. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to really dumb it down, and then I'll take it back to healthcare and in general. But if you look at McDonald's and you go in and you have a kiosk and you can order from McDonald's, there's a percentage of time that kiosk is down. You walk in and you're like, oh geez, it's not. So you still need a human to help you. If you walk in there, you order from the kiosk, but you're still getting food from a human. If you look at it, you're like, oh, do they have a mint shake today? It's now May and they don't have it anymore. You're going to ask the human for that, not that side. So I think that's at its most basic level. If you have technology that helps in tasks that are repeatable and scalable, and I think it helps the human significantly. We have a restaurant that we love. It's a Korean barbecue place in California, and they've got the robots that brings you the food, the whole works.
wow.
But you still have the humans that come up and take it off of that tray and put it on there. And you can order a Diet Coke, and the drink the robot will bring the Diet Coke out to you, because that's a mundane task. But cooking the meat, the computer can't cook the meat. And so I think that's it, kind of its basic. You get into the healthcare side, the AI is used in a lot of different ways. It's, how do we maybe enhance images, which I talked about earlier? How do we do personalized drugs? How do we, the algorithms to make decisions? But you have to have the human behind that. So I think that's if we have the right education programs to get people there, the right, learning the right questions to ask. One of the things that has been in healthcare forever is dictation. So we've got Siri or Alexa or whoever, fill in the blank, but that really has helped physicians for a long time to be able to dictate. One of the things that we're in my organization that we're trialing right now is ambient listening, which so the nurse walks in the room, is talking to you. There's a lot of information that can be gathered that the nurse then goes to document that maybe they missed and forgot because it's just small nuance. And maybe it's, I say something like, yeah, I gained a bunch of weight last month, but I just lost it. And maybe she forgot that note. That piece of information may be really important in the overall diagnosis. And so I think that type of AI, taking that ambulance and put it in there, again, it's helping, it's complementing what she's doing. It's not taking over what she's doing.
Yeah, so it's really helping us in a way. It's not really taking us over and kicking us out in a way. So there's
Right.
always going to be that human element that's necessary.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I've read in the healthcare industry that there's a lot that it's been helping with a lot already, and honestly, in areas that I wouldn't have even imagined so quickly. Like, I believe that the Neuralink implant on Nolan, I think was the first participant,
Yeah.
was
Mhm.
completely done. I mean, at least one portion of it was completely done by a robot, which was
Yeah.
insane to me. And also in terms of, I think AI is one of the things it's good at is recognizing patterns and collecting data and
Yeah.
making conclusions based on that. So it's been used in diagnosing, I believe, in things like cancer and reading all the screens and information after, like, even used for image enhancement, but then also creating conclusions. And I'm just curious, like, how accurate do you think like some of the current AI technologies we have that are being used for diagnosing purposes, like, are those really accurate right now to a degree, or do you think that's still a long ways away before it's like extremely
I,
like
so, I think it's very accurate, but a snapshot's never accurate. And Actually, my sister sent this to me recently. There was that she sends to her students. She's a nurse practitioner that she sends to her students about reading images, and it's a picture of Prince William holding up three fingers. Okay, and so if you see that from this angle, it looks like he's flipping you off. But if you see from this angle, he's got three things. And so her point being, it's really important to have several different views. And I think that's the part is even, let's say you're reading a mammogram, and the doctor, the AI is saying, hey, right here, see something. It's the doctor's job then to look to see if you look, did you look this direction, and this direction, and to see if that something means something. What it does is it's just an extra set of eyes that's calling attention to something here, but the computer may not 100%. If it looks like cancer and it's not on all of the other views, it may not be there. So I think it's a extra pair of eyes that helps you out.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, I think everything that we're able to see with technology these days is just fascinating. And I'm really excited for what the future holds and how much more this technology can keep advancing. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. It was a pleasure talking to you about all these different topics. Is there anything else you want to close with that you think we haven't covered that you think is important? Or
I want to thank you for being part of the brilliant new generation. I love your questions. I love being a part of this growth, and I want to thank you for your ongoing inquisitive nature and giving help and faith for future. But I'm excited to see where you go and do. So thanks for having me on.
incredible. Thank you so much, and good luck with everything with work and life going forward.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to my episode. If you enjoyed that episode, I guarantee that you'll love this episode right here. The best way to support the channel is by hitting the subscribe button. It'll help me to upgrade the channel, get better guests, better production, and overall more episodes for you. And by hitting the subscribe button, you'll ensure that you'll never miss a new release. While you're at it, hit the like button, leave a comment, and share the link with your best friend. Thank you once again for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.